Efendim hepiniz yoruldunuz biliyorum ama kahve arasıyla aranızdaki son sunumumuz Tenable sunumu olacak. Tenable firması tahmin ediyorum hepinizin Nessus markasıyla oldukça iyi tanıdığı firmalardan bir tanesi. Nessus'un yaratıcılarından, üreticilerinden bu sefer Security Center, Security Center Continuous View gibi iki çözümümüz var. Tenable aynı alanda oynamaya çalışan başka firmalardan çok farklı olarak güvenlik açıkları yönetimi ve teknik standartlar uyum yönetimini tek bir paket içerisinde sağlıyor. Oldukça enteresan bir teknoloji çözümü olacağını düşünüyorum bu alana bakanlar için. Özellikle regülasyonların yüksek olduğu endüstrilerde, bankacılık, sigorta, telekom endüstrilerinde oldukça enteresan sayılabilecek çözümleri var. Bugün Tenable'dan Jason Clark Bey, kıdemli sistem mühendisi bizlerle birlikte olacak. Jason'la sağ olsun bizi kırmayıp gelen bir misafir konuşmacımız daha var. Intertek'ten, Denizbank'tan Onur Alaşoğlu Bey. Kendisinden de özür diliyorum. Davetiyelerde ismini yanlış yazmışız. Alaşoğlu olarak yazmışız. Soy ismini Alaşoğlu olacak. Onur Bey bizlerle birlikte olacaklar. Jason'ı sahneye davet ediyorum. Jason, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Burak. Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'll introduce myself just whilst we're waiting to get the slides on the screen. My name is Jason Clark. I'm the sales engineer for Tenable. I work in this region with Burak, Simturk, now known as Innovera. And what a surprise that was this morning. Okay, so the presentation I'm going to do this afternoon is titled Security Issues That Deserve a Logo. It's a bit of a strange name, but hopefully it'll become clear in a moment. So let's get this. There we go. Anything coming through? There we go. Okay. So new threats are being discovered every day. I'm not here to tell you that. You already know this, okay? But I just want to set the scene. So we have the likes of things like Heartbleed, you know, a really big, important vulnerability. Now, the thing is that who would have imagined any of our CEOs coming to us on the morning of April the 6th, 2014, and asking us how vulnerable, you know, if we had this vulnerability, this OpenSSL 101B vulnerability in our environment. They wouldn't understand what that meant. They had no idea about it. But on April the 7th, 2014, that's exactly what they did. They came up to us and they said, do we have Heartbleed in our environment? Do we have this new vulnerability? And it's because they'd seen it on the news, they'd heard about it on the news, it had a cool name, Heartbleed. Sometime later, it got this cool logo of a heart bleeding as well. And so it was the media attention that actually brought it to the attention, thank you, of the people, you know, the boardroom and the people in our environment. And there have been some massive vulnerabilities, shell shock, you know, open source vulnerabilities that have been, you know, we've been using open source for many years. Shell shock, the vulnerability itself, was around for 20 years before it was either discovered or before it was publicly announced. I'm sure some hackers in this world were aware of it long before the public announcement was made. Stage fright was another massive vulnerability that affected mobile phones, obviously. And there have been some huge vulnerabilities discovered in Flash recently. But as well as these big names, the big hitters, if you like, the ones with the cool logo and the fancy name, there have been some really critical vulnerabilities that haven't received the same amount of attention, but you know, nevertheless are considered to be more dangerous. So for Windows, for example, MS-1466 or MS-1464, that doesn't have a catchy name, that doesn't have a cool logo, but around the time that these critical vulnerabilities that allowed someone to get privilege escalation on, remote privilege escalation on your systems, around the time that these were being discovered or being announced, things like Freak and Poodle were also being announced. So, you know, we've all heard of Freak and Poodle, and so have our CEOs or the other members of the organization. So they're coming to us and they're asking us to make sure we're patched against Freak and Poodle when we've got critical vulnerabilities like MS-1466 and MS-1464 that, you know, are going to more likely to affect us much more and put us much more at risk. And it's this kind of reaction to the media hype that I want to address, and that's where I get the title of the presentation, security issues that deserve their own logo. Things that are much more important than what we've seen in the news, necessarily. So the logos themselves and the media headlines is driving a certain type of behavior. Okay, so fair enough. It's helping us as security practitioners to raise awareness of the issues that we're facing. But what it's also doing is it's driving the behavior of the security departments. They're responding to the CEO saying, we must patch against freak. I've just heard about it on the news. And not really taking a step back and just sort of assessing, well, how important is it that we actually patch for freak and do that before we patch for something else that might be more critical to us in our environment? So I'm trying to set the scene. We're trying to prevent us from just having these knee-jerk reactions to the media hype and to present a much more mature and sort of strategic approach to security threats in our environment. The guys that are controlling my laptop, could you just click, see the cross in the top right-hand corner, could you just click on the one next to it, because that's, you're actually seeing the presenter view there, and we want to see the actual view. This icon, just to the left of the cross, if you could do that, we'll get some cool animation instead of... Okay, so... To the left, that's it? No, that's the one. Excellent, right, we'll get the cool animations now. So we didn't work hard on getting these animations for nothing, we'll get those. Okay, so what I've done is, I've decided I've had enough of all this media hype. I'm going to sit down, be a little bit creative. I'm a techie, so that was quite difficult. Come up with some cool names and some logos for security issues that have been around for a long time. They're things that we've heard of, but now hopefully, with these cool logos, we'll give them some attention, and we'll try to change the behavior of our security departments. So, I'm going to take ROT 26 as an example. So obviously, this comes from ROT 13. So I've called this type of security threat ROT 26, and that security threat is not encrypting sensitive data. Why do we still have sensitive intellectual property or customer data in our environment that isn't encrypted? And the Ashley Madison hack is a really good example. So 15 million user credentials went missing, were stolen. And at first, the company was saying, it's okay, we've encrypted all of our usernames and passwords and all the user detail, the account details. And they had, but what they hadn't realized is that the username and passwords were also being stored in clear text because the process, the operations around encrypting stuff meant that they didn't delete the username and password that was stored in clear text. So it was encrypted, but it was also stored in clear text. And so, there was a lot of repercussions there. So let's take a look at some of these security issues that you should already know about, but I'm now presenting them with a cool logo and a different name. So the first one then is glimpse. Now I don't know how glimpse translates. I'm looking at the translators in the booth, but glimpse just means take a look at something, or take a glance at something. And it's all about having a lack of visibility of the environment that you're trying to protect, due largely to compound annual growth in the size of the infrastructure, but also due to other technologies as well. Now, I talk a lot to CISOs, security managers in my environment, and time again, I ask them what issues they're facing, and lack of visibility or lack of an awareness of what we have in our environment is always one of the things at the top of their list. I was talking to a security director of a supermarket retailer in the UK just about a month ago, and he was saying to me, I asked him these questions, and he was saying to me, I can tell you exactly how many cans of baked beans or how many tins of tomatoes I've got on every shelf in all of my supermarkets around the UK, but I can't tell you very accurately how many servers I have in my infrastructure. And I see this time and again. So this is glimpse, and this is a few slides on that. So most organizations lack visibility. Okay, this sort of, if you think about the top 20 critical security controls, this tackles item number one. do an inventory of the hardware that you have in your environment. Because if you don't know what you have in your environment, how can you protect it? Now, virtualization really fits in nicely with this lack of visibility, because it's now much easier to just spin up a new virtual image in a matter of seconds. But ask yourself, how long would it take you to detect any new virtual system in your environment? Do you have the controls in place to be able to detect it within a few moments? Or is it going to take you weeks, days, weeks, or months to detect it? If it's going to take you days, weeks, or months to detect a new virtual machine, you may never detect it. That virtual machine may be used by one of your engineers. They might have some tools on it that they use for their job, and they might spin that up once a week, spend a couple of hours using those tools, and then when they're finished with that, the purpose of that virtual machine, they'll just shut it down. So it might only exist in your environment for 2 hours every week. Now, how do we know that engineer, he's a very diligent engineer, a hard worker, but how do we know that he's maintaining that server in an appropriate way, in a secure way? Is he patching it with all the Microsoft patches? Does he have antivirus product installed? Is that antivirus product licensed properly, and is it being updated? So these are the sorts of questions that we need to be able to answer. And if this virtual machine is just popping up for 2 hours and then being shut down again, it's very difficult unless we have sort of a way of continuously monitoring the environment. Now, I brought my iPhone up on stage. I was supposed to put the timer on, so I knew how long I was talking, but I forgot to do that, so someone's going to have to prompt me when I talk too long. So this, I say it's my iPhone. This is my company phone. It belongs to Tenable, and they've paid for it, and they pay for my bill every month. And I'm fine with that. They allow me to put music on it, which is great, so I can listen to music when I'm traveling. But because it's Tenable's, I've got no problem if they decide that if I lose this, they can just wipe the data remotely. They can decide what software, what applications I can put on here. They have control over it, and I'm fine with that. All I really want is to be able to get email, keep in touch with my family, and listen to music, and then use it as a phone. So that's the sort of policy we have in the UK. I'm not sure what you do here in Turkey in companies, but in the US, 90% of workers are actually using their own personal phones as part of their work phones. Most organizations in the US actually expect their employees to provide their own phone to use for work purposes. Now, in November last year, that the US have those Black Friday sales, the day before Thanksgiving, where everyone goes crazy for cut-down, discounted products. Last year, they were selling, on the Black Friday sales, they were selling tablets for around $50. $50 for a tablet. Now, I can't even imagine how somebody manages to manufacture a tablet, sell it for $50, and make a profit on it. So, if they're trying to push these out, as cheaply as possible, what sort of attention is going to be paid to the security of that tablet? And the sort of person that's going to be paying $50 for a tablet is probably not going to be interested in adding security software afterwards or putting security controls on that tablet after the purchase. They're probably not even going to be bothered about installing applications from reputable sources like the Google Play Store. They're probably just going to be installing apps that they find on the web. So most of these mobile devices, these sort of BYODs, are configured with poor security out of the box. And if the organization doesn't have control of that device, then they have very little understanding of how it's configured. Okay, had to mention Internet of Things. I think there were some key words that somebody from SimTurk said you mustn't mention, and this is the last one that I am mentioning. Okay, so Internet of Things. So I quite like this idea of having devices at home that I can control from my iPhone. But the idea of being able to switch a light on and off from my iPhone because it's IP enabled. I mean, just use the switch on the wall. It just seems crazy to me. But please ignore the company there. This is the example I'm going to use is not this company, but there was an IP light bulb, IP-enabled light bulb that you could control from your iPhone, which also allowed you to connect to it remotely and extract the WPA password for the Wi-Fi network that it was attached to. Now, what that means is I could be sat out somebody's house that has one of these light bulbs. I can connect to their network, get their WPA password, and then I have access to their network. Now, if I'm or if you're a mobile worker, you've got your work laptop at home, you've connected it to your home laptop, and I'm sat outside in my car with my laptop, and I've managed to get access to your Wi-Fi network. What else could I be doing? So as organizations, we need to think about how we can protect our workforce when they're at home, when they're connected to a hotel Wi-Fi or a coffee shop, something like that. So Tenable did a survey at the beginning of the year. We had about 400 people respond, and we asked them about infrastructure growth and visibility and the problems that they were facing. And on average, the companies that responded had a 28% compound annual growth in terms of their infrastructure. So again, this just kind of compounds the problem. So when it comes to visibility, there are 4 key areas that are causing us issues. Virtualization, cloud, didn't really talk much about cloud, but cloud is one of them, BYOD, and then the last graphic on the right there is Internet of Things, IP, devices that never used to have IP addresses, but can now be IP enabled, and bring some benefit, but also pose security risks. I'm sure there was something else I was going to tell you there, but I'll move on. I'll come back to it if I can. Yeah. So the idea is we have to embrace technology. Technology is advancing at a phenomenal rate. Paradoxically, our ability to keep up with that pace from a security perspective needs to keep up, and we're finding it difficult. The more IP, that's right, that's what I was going to tell you. The more IP devices we have in your environment, the more code is going to be that you're going to have, and the more code you have, the more vulnerabilities they're likely to be. So your attack surface is getting bigger as well. So embrace will be circumvented. Now, just again, I want to use another couple of examples. So first of all, we can't use 20th century solutions for 21st century problems. Okay, if you think about, let's say you want to put a video surveillance in your server room because you're worried about somebody going in and plugging in a USB stick into one of your servers or something like that. If you had a video surveillance project, you'd be pretty disappointed if the project leader decided the solution to put in place was a Polaroid camera. A camera that was going to take a picture, let's say we set it up to take a picture once every hour on the hour. That's not going to catch any criminals. Okay? And that's the kind of approach that we're taking when it comes to scanning our networks on just a periodic basis. How are we going to detect those VMware images that spin up and then spin down? How are we going to detect the mobile devices that come into the office occasionally but not there every day? If we have a sales guy, he's going to be out on the road most of the time trying to sell our products. He's got a laptop with him, he's got a mobile phone. He comes into the office once a month. Do we make sure that the scan that we take, the periodic scan that we're taking, happens at the time that that sales guy is in the office? That would just be impossible because it's just 2 separate things in the organization. Okay, so periodic scanning isn't enough. So, a question for you guys, and I'm not looking for you to answer me, it's just a question for you to think about. Can you tell me what assets, data, and vulnerabilities reside on your network right now? What sort of visibility do you have? And if you don't have full visibility, how are you going to get there? Okay, so back to my threats that need better logos. My next one is Invader. This is my favorite. This is the ability to identify attack paths or attack paths that hackers are taking, and then defend against the breaches that result in those attack paths. Now, this whole term, attack path, does sound like a bit like a marketing term, something that a marketing department might come up with to scare customers. I like to think of it more as the adversary, that the hacker's return on investment. So how quickly can an attacker get into my network? How do they actually get into my network? How do they actually do it? And how much data do they have access to once they've broken in? These are things the measures that we can take to see how successful an attacker can be. So here's an example attack path. At the very beginning, we need the attacker, the hacker themselves, need to get a foothold into the environment. Now, typically that's done through a phishing email that's sent out that fools somebody into clicking on a link in an email. Or it could be a vulnerability that's found in the environment, like SQL injection, for example. Once the hacker has got into the environment, they're going to explore, they're going to find data and systems of interest. And if they find anything, well, the next thing they'll do is establish them a more permanent place in the environment. They'll install some code that gives them quicker access so they can come back on a more permanent basis. Next step would be evasion. They're going to cover their tracks. They're going to edit log files so it doesn't look like they've been in. Then they start exfiltrating the data. This could be intellectual property, or it could be customer data, that sort of thing. And then finally, they'll sell that data to third parties for a profit. So what we need to do then is to analyze the attack paths and just try to add layers of security, layers of control in that path to prevent the attacker, hopefully at every stage. Or the sooner that we stop them, the more likely they'll give up and move on to a different organization that makes it, that's making it a little bit easier for them to get access. So, first of all then, how can we stop them getting a foothold? Well, we can reduce the attack surface by identifying and prioritizing internet-facing systems that have easily exploitable vulnerabilities and weak configurations. We can stop them exploring, or identify them exploring by identifying pivoting in the network by attackers through real-time network analysis. We can prevent them from establishing themselves by installing permanent code by integrating multiple threat feeds from the likes of the previous speaker, whose company name is Threat Labs. We have Reversing Labs as a partner. We have many of the other feeds that they mentioned on their slides earlier. To prevent people from editing log files to cover their tracks, what we can do is make sure that we're sending all of our logs to a centralized and secure location. And then from an exfiltration perspective, if we identify undesired connections to command and control systems or unexpected IPs through reputational analysis. Okay? So we know about defense in depth. There's various layers that we can implement, and various controls that we can implement in the different layers to help put the attacker off from getting access to our systems. So here's the next question for you. What controls should you be implementing in your environment to continuously protect and monitor your assets? I think the answers are probably going to be fairly similar, but each organization is going to have different priorities. You're going to have different levels of critical systems. Those critical systems for one organization might be your web servers that carry the portal for your customers to access, to make payments to you. For others, it might be your back-end database servers that are storing intellectual property. So the message for Invader, though, is to continuously monitor the attack surface, and the key there is to do that continuously. Next up, we've got stutter. This isn't really a technological problem. This is all about the problem that security teams have when it comes to communicating effectively to the rest of the business. So let's imagine, just a strange example. Let's imagine we can, as a security team, we can see our company, getting on with their business, but you can see that they're getting to a security issue that's going to, blow up in their face. They're running towards the edge of a cliff. Now, what we could do is run up after them and take a tactical approach, rugby tackle them to the ground and say, hey, we're the heroes. We stopped you running off of that cliff and, the business going down the pan. That's a very tactical approach, and that's a very old-fashioned way of security imposing restrictions on the environment. What we would rather do is take a more strategic approach, and instead of rugby tackling the business to the ground when they approach the cliff, run alongside them and say, look, guys, it looks like you're going to run off the edge of that cliff. We've got some choices for you. Number one, if you want, we could build you a bridge so that you don't fall off the edge. You just run across the bridge. That'll cost you $5 million. Or if that's too expensive, maybe we can build you a parachute so that when you get to the edge of the cliff, you won't fall off fast. The parachute will open and you'll have a soft landing. That'll cost you $500. Or for $5, we can just give you an umbrella, and hopefully that will slow your fall down and break your fall. So what we're doing, we're taking a much more strategic approach, a risk-based approach. And it's up to the business then to decide which of those solutions they want to go for based on risk, how adverse they are to risk and their attitude to risk. So many security teams lack the credibility at the business level. If your board is coming to you and asking you how secure are we, how secure is our network, and you're saying, well, we have AES 256 encryption, we've got Palo Alto firewalls, we're using identity management software for single sign-on, and all of our credentials are stored, in a secure database. If they're coming to you and you're telling them that, and they're repeatedly coming to you and you're repeatedly saying that, it means they don't understand, okay? Think about what the business understands. The business understands numbers. So how to communicate effectiveness of security and demonstrate value to the business, it's all about metrics and numbers. If we start talking bits and bytes and technical detail in the boardroom, they're just not going to understand. So we need to think about how we're going to measure our environment with effective metrics. If you can't measure it, you can't control it. Or if you can't measure IT, you can't control it. And if you can't control it, then you can't improve. Okay? So just thinking of some example metrics, let's think of secure configurations. If we could present to the board a chart each month that shows how well configured we were with a number, say we were 80% compliant to our compliance, the agreed technical controls that we've all agreed on. We were 80% compliant last month. This month, we're 85% compliant. That shows an improvement in the compliance. So that shows that the security team have been doing a good job, and you can attribute that to extra staffing, which was an extra cost, or the compliance level may go down, and maybe that will give you the ammunition to argue for more resource for the security projects. So the trick here is to align the security with the business drivers. Find out what it is that what does your business do to make money? What does your business need to do to make more money, to become more profitable? And how can you, from a security perspective, help the business do that? Do you build them a $5 million bridge, or do you give them a $500 parachute? Okay, what's next? Bandit. Right, so Bandit is all about buying expensive solutions for problems that our particular organization doesn't necessarily have. I have a bit of a go at the concept of advanced persistent threats here, because I think that we hear scare stories from some marketing departments in some vendors saying that we're all being attacked by nation states like China and North Korea are all using advanced persistent threats to break into our systems. And I stand to be corrected, but I think it's just baloney. I think it's just marketing, because if I was trying to get into one of your networks, I would probably try to find credentials in one of the big data dumps, or I would look for SQL injection vulnerabilities in your web servers. Or, I would look for weaknesses in your employees, and I would perhaps, offer one of your employees a bribe. The size of the bribe would depend on, the value of the data that I'm trying to get access to. None of these really are advanced persistent threats. So APT does exist, but I think for most of us, we need to sort out the simple stuff, because hackers tend to go for the low-hanging fruit. If you don't have secure configurations, and you do have vulnerabilities in your environment, then that's the sort of thing that hackers are going to go after. So, I think we should all take a step back and accept that the security vendors are not going to save us. Don't just buy more security solutions for problems that aren't really a problem for your organization. And the reason for that is that as you buy more security solutions, you're actually adding more code to your environment. Now, I'm sure your budgets are really restricted, so if you're buying solutions that you don't need and you're adding more code to the environment, that code in itself will have vulnerabilities, then you could potentially be introducing more vulnerabilities by buying secure solutions. If we think back to the Heartbleed example right at the beginning of the presentation, the Heartbleed wouldn't affect an Windows IIS web server. Okay, if it's got secure code on it, it would be perfectly secure against Heartbleed. But if you've put an F5 device in front of that, that was susceptible to Heartbleed, and that device terminates on OpenSSL, then suddenly you're not susceptible to Heartbleed. Windows IIS server is suddenly now susceptible to it. So adding security solutions without giving proper thought to what you're trying to achieve can actually introduce more code, and that code could have vulnerabilities in it. So the point here is that security isn't about throwing more money and more solutions at problems. It's about managing the security solutions we have already in a more effective and strategic way. So practice the fundamentals first. Think of the top 20 security controls. Tenable can help you with the first 5. Do an inventory of your hardware so you know what to protect. Do an inventory of the applications and services that are running on those. Okay? Are you patching just Firefox because that's your corporate web browser? That might be the case, but if you do an inventory of a software, suddenly you find out that everyone's using Google Chrome and you haven't patched that at all, so that presents a problem. Excuse me. Number 3 is secure configurations. So Tenable can help you prove compliance to best practice policy guidelines or things like PCI. We can also take in your own technical controls and build compliance files, audit files based on those. And then the 4th one there is vulnerability, do vulnerability detection. And then number 5 is making sure that you've got up-to-date malware. And we can help you bolster your malware defenses. We're not a replacement for it, but we can help you bolster that as well. So the message, I guess, then is organizations shouldn't really focus on the zero-day threats, even though they're the interesting ones, because it's always exciting or ingenious finding out what hackers have been able to do to get into a system. So there was one just last week where I don't have an Apple Watch, but these smart watches, they have a gyroscope in them, and there was a vulnerability or a threat that used the gyroscope in the watch to try and calculate what the passcode was to get into someone's iPhone. So that's ingenious, that's exciting, and that's glamorous. But really what we should be doing is fixing the 100-day vulnerabilities that already exist in the environment and the ones that are the right priority for you. Okay, so I think we've come to the end. There's one more that I just added. I didn't have time to put it on all the other slides. I added this the other day because I was talking to a CISO of a bank in Abu Dhabi. And they actually brought up the subject of the Swiss banker in Switzerland, obviously, who leaked a load of information about some private clients that the bank was helping in Switzerland to evade tax. And that was a good example of a disgruntled employee. And what this CISO in Abu Dhabi was saying is he has a lot of migrant workers coming from poor backgrounds, where a $10,000 bribe to you or I is a lot of money, but it's not life-changing. I wouldn't risk my career taking a $10,000 bribe, but for a migrant worker, that could be life-changing amount of money that he could send his kids through university. So we also have to think about that one as well. So I'm coming to the end. Let me just talk about what Tenable do for 2 minutes. So we take a 21st century approach to this problem. Okay, we have different sensors that you can put in the environment. We have the Nessus active scanner. That's going to be doing your periodic scanning. The passive vulnerability scanner is going to be looking at data in motion, so it's looking at traffic as it flows around the network. We have the log correlation engine, which will be gathering, centralize and store all your logs. And just a couple of months ago, we introduced Nessus agents, which you can use to install on the laptops of your mobile workforce. So if you do have a sales guy that's out of the office on a regular basis, he'll still get that scan done locally, and those results will be uploaded to Security Center when he gets back gets back into the office. Okay, I think I've run out of time, haven't I? So, yeah. So the message is, that Tenable can help you monitor your security in real time. We can monitor all of your devices all of the time. And thank you very much.
Are you going to be taking Onur to stage? Are you going to be taking Onur to stage?
Yeah. So we've got Onur. Yes. Hi.
Please.
So we recently sold our product to Onur's company. Do you want to just talk about your company?
İsmim Onur. İnternette çalışıyorum güvenlik mühendisi olarak. Deniz Banka'nın iştiraki. Okay.
Yeah, I've got some questions for you. Sorry, I haven't got them written down. So Onur, thank you for coming on the stage. I really appreciate that. But what I'd like to do is just can you tell me, what was the, about thinking about the project that you did? What were the business drivers, and what was it that you were trying to achieve with that project?
Okay. We targeted with this project to report the system's compatibility according to our security rules. And follow the progress over time.
Okay, so you have your own compliance, your own security controls that you're measuring, yeah? So we're building those into the product for you, is that correct?
Yes.
Cool, okay, thanks. And so, one of the things I talked about in the presentation was, lack of visibility. So when you deployed the product, did you have any surprises when you started using the discovery tools? Were there systems that you weren't aware of?
No.
No? Really? Okay, all right. Why is that then?
We already have Nessus.
Okay, all right, okay. So they already had our product, but not the enterprise version. So you actually migrated from the Nessus product to Security Center, the enterprise product.
Yes.
So why did you do that? What advantages did you see in the Security Center that made you want to do the upgrade?
Security Center has improved dashboards and reporting features. And you can control all your Nessus scanners in one console.
Right.
And now we can follow all improvements day to day with this console.
Right, okay. So the reporting that you're doing, I guess you're reporting up higher in management, but also then to the people that do...
And detailed reports.
Great. Okay, cool, thanks. And then I guess the last question really then, it was Innovera, it was Simturk at the time, but Innovera that did the implementation for you. So, can you just tell me a little bit about the implementation, how smooth it went, and what sort of support you received from Innovera at the time?
Okay. Actually, implementation. Okay, yeah, thanks. Implementation process took less than we expected.
Less time.
Yeah,
okay,
less,
there's a first.
It was very easy.
Yeah.
And the Innovera pleased us with their support during POC and implementation process.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Cheers.
Onur Bey'e ve Jason'a teşekkür ediyoruz.